When we talk about terrorism in Nigeria, most of us picture attacks, violence, and chaos on the street. But there is a quite far more insidious engine driving it.
Well, money terrorist groups don't just act on ideology. They operate like businesses, from kidnappings for ransom to smuggling, extortion, and illicit trade.
You're right, Claire. They have built a complex financial network that funds everything from recruitment to attacks, all while staying largely invisible.
And that's exactly what makes tracking them so tricky, Demola. But it isn't just about cash being handed over in shady corners. Terrorism financing often hides in plain sight through informal money transfers. Of course, shell companies, legitimate businesses, even banks too are involved.
The law draws a line. Money laundering is about concealing criminal proceeds, but terrorist financing can use both illegal and legal funds as long as the end game is terror.
Absolutely. But that fine line is exactly where enforcement hits a wall. Don't get us wrong. Nigeria does have the tools. I mean, we have the tools. Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit is there. Laws like the Terrorism Prevention Act, the AFCC Act, the Money Laundering Act of 2022. But concerned persons believe that laws alone are not enough.
Yes, Claire, they are not enough. Weak reporting systems, gaps in prosecution, and evolving technology make it a constant cat and mouse game.
So stopping terrorism financing isn't just about, chasing criminals. It's also about cutting off the fuel that powers attacks while protecting the integrity of our financial system and, of course, the safety of every Nigerian.
So today we confront the multi-headed threats of terrorism financing in Nigeria and explore how the nation can effectively tackle this pressing challenge. Thanks for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria. This is our midweek episode. I am Ademola Adeoye.
Demola and I certainly don't have the powers or wherewithal to confront terrorism finance, but we do have the knowledge experts who will be coming here to, of course, break down all the concepts and the modus operandi of all the, net or cell groups involved. Anyway, I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. I thank you for joining us and also welcome you to the program. We are live on the network service of the NTA.
Thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Terrorism financing is a serious challenge facing many nations, including Nigeria. So today, we'll take an in-depth look at this complex security issue, which has grown increasingly concerning over the past 2 decades. But first, let's hear a background report from Ibrahim Bello Gunda.
Terrorism in Nigeria is a complex, long-standing and multidimensional security crisis that has significantly impacted the country's stability, economic development, and social cohesion, with major threats from Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP, alongside banditry. Terrorism financing is the collective provision or transfer of funds, material or financial services for terrorist groups, directly or indirectly, to enable terrorists act or support their activities. The goal is to fund operations, recruitment, propaganda, and attacks, posing threats to national and international security. Nigeria has been grappling with terrorism financing, particularly in the context of Boko Haram and other extremist groups. These groups often rely on various funding sources, including illicit activities like kidnapping for ransom, robbery, and extortion. Others are external funding, support from foreign donors, including terrorist organizations, internal financing, including profit from illegal activities such as cattle trading and smuggling. The Nigerian government has taken steps to combat terrorism financing, including establishing the Financial Intelligence Unit to track and disrupt terrorist financing network, implementing anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism regulations to prevent the misuse of the financial system. Other measures are international cooperation and collaboration with global partners to share intelligence and best practices. To effectively address terrorism financing in Nigeria, a multifaceted approach is necessary involving government agencies, financial institutions, civil society organizations, and citizens. How important is it to curb the sources of terrorism financing in the fight against terrorist and extremist groups in Nigeria? How impactful has the measures taken by federal government been? And how should Nigeria ensure those financing terrorism face consequences? This and more are some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will find answers to as we discuss terrorism financing.
All right, thank you, Ibrahim Bello Gunda, for the background report. We have a guest here, Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired. Of course, he's a doctor, security and development expert. He's right here with us in Abuja. Thank you very much, Wing Commander. And good to see you once again.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning and compliment of the season.
Same to you. Good morning.
Well, we're talking about terrorism financing, which we know that terror groups exploit, the Nigerian financial, system in several ways. I mean, and you have red flags being raised here and there. So, in your own, view, what do you think are the main sources of terrorism financing in Nigeria, and how have they been able to run over the years?
Well, thank you so much. As your background story highlighted, terrorism financing there are so many sources, but if you localize it here in Nigeria, you look at issues of, depending on where, because, various regions with various peculiarities and so on. But generally, it could be from issues like, one, kidnapping, that's through ransom. Some of them, they put levy on people, that's the locals, through levy. So they even engage on economic activities. We've heard in the Lake Chad region where the terrorists, for example, engage in fishing, because, so it doesn't stand out. It's not always that it comes and say, hey, we're here, we're a separate entity, and this is what we do to finance terrorism. Some of this are actually legitimate business. That's in the outlook. There are businesses that are conducted day-to-day businesses. However, the utilization of the funds is for terrorism means. So it could be all those businesses, it could be all those illegal, of course there's the gangsterism, depending on what part, extortion, and so on. It could be also financing from individuals. Okay. That's for those that are seeking to either use terrorism to achieve certain goals. So it could be people having legitimate businesses, however, channeling those funds to to finance terrorism. It could be the perpetrators of the terrorism themselves, okay, earning funds for themselves through blackmail, or any illicit or illegitimate means of getting that could be used to finance terrorism. However, money laundering, and this is where also money laundering comes in. So a legitimate means or illegitimate funds coming through the legitimate system and then going to other illegitimate activities that could help. So there are these various means, and it all depends, right from the smallest and community-based terrorists up to international terrorists. And this money or the funds could flow through either local means or even through international borders. You have drug trafficking. You have all sorts of things. You have trade in other illicit commodities that finance the terrorists. All that come into basket of how terrorism is being financed from one place to the other. Okay. They could be different. Okay. They could look, that's in appearance or even in process and so on. But the ultimate goal or the ultimate aim is to finance activities of terrorists and terrorism.
Okay, I'm just wondering if Wing Commander can just give us an idea of the magnitude of this challenge, whether it's just, if there are indicators that actually point that this is a central national security issue.
Absolutely. Financing is the oxygen for terrorism. Without financing, you can't do anything. Just like we know in our day-to-day livelihood or in our day-to-day living, you need financing to move from point A to B. You need financing to procure logistics. You need financing to ensure that you are even able to recruit, because some of these recruitments are through incentive, issues of giving funds or giving money to this. So the issue of financing is so important and so wide that it is the life wire. Once you cut financing from those activities, I tell you, it drops drastically. So it's important to identify. This means it's important to identify the channels through which that is used. And it's important to identify those businesses and the persons that are involved so that you cut that oxygen that supplies the entire financing architecture, if I would put it that. So it's a very strong, big security imperative in the ways that if you're able to identify that, I mean, it's not the silver bullet, but I tell you that it drastically, once you cut off that, you're cutting the oxygen that provides.
Okay.
We're talking so much about, curbing terrorism financing. A lot of people probably don't get it, don't get the economic cost. The cost to our economy in terms of trade and investment, in terms of livelihood. I don't know if you can just give us an example, leveraging what's happening in different parts of the country.
So if you look at the methods of this financing or the methods where it's gotten, first of all, if you look at extortion, there were reports last year of how many, billions, hundreds of billions that were spent by Nigerians in terms of ransom payment, and if you look at the quantum of money that goes to that, and you look at vis-a-vis if that money was used for even if for livelihoods, for households, and so on and so on. So you see that it's huge. Not to talk of even what the effect of the terrorism itself. Now, an act is funded. That act ensures that people are not able to go about their legitimate businesses. It ensures that people are not able to perform some functions. For example, farmers for us, because sometimes when we talk of these things, why it looks as if it's that up there. We talk of it in the abstract. Now, these terrorist activities affect everyday living of the individual, from the villages to the urban areas and everywhere. And even government, in the sense that what government will have used for other development, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. All that is dedicated to, say, security provision. Why? Because there are terrorists because they are being financed or they have the funds to run this, have taken over that. So when you look at all that and try to quantify it, it's enormous. If we look at budgets, for example, over the past 3-4 years, the defense budgets have been blowing. Why? It's because we're not fighting an external war, for example. It's something internal. It shows you that not only that the communities are exploited, not only that the individuals or the communities are not able to go about their businesses and thereby generate legitimate income, but it also takes so much. It takes toll on the government, and it also affects even how we're viewed internationally, which in return affects ease of movement, because you go to a lot of embassies and you see all sort of restrictions. Also, there's some embassies that you have to do verification, you have to do data. By the time you spend more than $1 million just to get a visa, you're not talking of the flight, you're not talking of, and so many other restrictions. And if you go one-on-one with them, you find out that most of these actions are actually put in because they feel that there are some lapses here and there in terms of terrorism or acts of that terror, which includes finance.
Before we bring in our guest who just joined us, I just want to ask if in your whole experience, as a security expert and of course as a military personnel, is there any experience that you probably had, relating to illicit channeling of funds, in that area?
So personally, no, because I dealt more on the what we call the research or the analysis part of it. So kind of like you try to join the dots. What is it? Because like I told you, you could see a legitimate business or something that has the face on the upper limit of a legitimate business. But when you dig deep, you find out that they are doing some kind of, they could be related to that. Or you even see international connections. Why is this? Yes. So all asking those questions, why are we having this traffic at around this time? Why is this crisis all of a sudden happening at a particular place? Why is so person interested in something? So all this, they are links, or they are dots that when you connect, you start to see, it gives a wider picture, and it helps to say, okay, if we cut off this, because there are, and so this, like I said, could be, there's this global initiative or global collaboration, either through the Financial Action Task Force or through the Interpol or other security agencies that ensure that, or even through the banking system, right, that ensure that all these are identified, they are curtailed first, and the people, you go after the businesses and the individuals that do all that. So until you connect those dots, you will not be able to point to.
You know why I asked? I asked because some time ago, some non-profit organizations were actually alleged to, be channels, pipelines. For funding.
So you can't deny the international dimension sometimes and that's why I say that. So and that's why there's a global action. You can't deny the fact that there are interests, and they can't deny the fact that some of these funds get moved across international borders. Either through money laundering and so on and so forth. And if we take, for example, the Lake Chad region, you find out that the Lake Chad region serves a confluence of about 3 to 4 countries. So the moment there is movement between, say, trade between Nigeria and Niger, Chad, or Cameroon, you find out that these people move freely because they don't respect international borders anyway in the first place. So we are the ones now saying, oh, it's international, we have to collaborate with colleagues across the border. They see it as just a drive across and so on and so forth. So until there is that international collaboration, I'm happy that a lot of countries are seeing the need to do that. And there's that willingness once identified. And we have to be very careful because, and I know maybe you're going to touch this later, because we play with some of these terms. We use them in ways that make us look sometimes as if we are not serious with it, or because we just label anything, we say financing terrorism and so on and so forth.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Salman. I mean, I can call you doctor, actually. You're a PhD. So, but let's just bring in our guest, the other guest, AIG Abutu Yaro, who just came in while we're having the discussion. AIG, it's good to have you this morning. We're talking about financing terrorism in Nigeria. And I know that you have been, as a former AIG, you have an idea of, because it has become a worrisome, issue right now. And a lot of these terrorists, how they, sort of move funds without government or even the financial institution being able to, pinpoint and where these funds are coming from. So how do terrorist groups in Nigeria, tell us, fund their operations without drawing the law enforcement agencies' attention?
Thank you, and good morning for having me. Again, thank you, NTA, for giving me an award as a distinguished contributor to your program for the year 2025. I feel elated. I don't take it for granted.
You deserve it.
I thank NTA for that. Now, coming to the subject of the day, like as my distinguished speaker or panelist has enunciated, it is obvious that whereas it is a notorious fact that the Nigerian government has in place many measures to reduce terrorism financing in our country, especially through the setting up of NFIU, through the enactment of the Anti-Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022, through CBN enactment of counter-terrorism fund monitoring platforms, through banking regulations with respect to KYC, that is know your customers, and other regulatory mechanisms, which of course, as I speak, in 2026, Nigeria has been lifted by the European Union from the class of countries that are under surveillance for terrorism financing challenges. And even our Minister of Finance issued a statement about 3 days ago commending that our elevation and recognition by the European Union. Nigeria was elevated with countries like South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia. Whereas countries like British West Isles, I've forgotten the name of that country, and Bolivia were put under surveillance. So to an extent, we have been elevated with European Union consideration that our anti-money laundering platforms are working and effective. However, with respect to the question, whereas this much ground has been attained and the challenges persist, it is traceable to many factors, which of course includes one, our geolocation. About 6 months ago, when I appeared in this studio with respect to issue of small arms in West Africa, I emphasized strongly the need for us as a country to reboot our relationship with our strategic neighbors. When it comes to terrorist financing, our relationship with our strategic neighbors in West Africa is a key segment that cannot be ignored. For example, Niger Republic. We have about 900 and something kilometers boundary stretch with Niger Republic. We have about 7 of our states having boundary with Niger Republic. Where, regardless of the form and the typology of government they are running there, our strategic interest prevails. And it is important that for us to have a more effective coverage of intercepting, frustrating, and apprehending terrorist funding. Our relationship with our strategic neighbor, especially Niger, is key in this algorithm. That is to say, 7 of our states are having contigual, cultural, and lingual contiguity with Niger. That makes the issue of stone-cast boundary demarcation to become an illusion. And under that prevailing atmosphere, in my view, it is important for us to continue to have continuous engagement with Niger, regardless of their forms and types of governance. The moment we ignore this doctrine, terrorism financing in real terms, despite the fact that we have perfected informal sector censorship or surveillance. I mean, despite the fact that we have perfected formal sector censorship through banking, through regulation, through statutory measures and legislative enactment, that informal sector will still compromise all these our laudable efforts because Niger is contiguous to us. Illicit terrorism funding comes through direct cash. Illicit terrorism funding comes through ransom for money transaction. Illicit terrorist funding comes through mining and solid mineral transactional engagements. And I can tell you, my brother, the rich solid mineral zone of our country, to a reasonable extent, is contiguous to Niger Republic. That is the Northwest. That is where we have the corridor of solid gold. And beside that, the Northwest is geographically, culturally, linguistically, faith-based contiguity with Niger Republic. We can't avoid that aspect. We need to have introspection and re-engagement so that our devices and action can have substantial impact in minimizing the inflow of terrorist funds and terrorist apparatus, terrorist logistics. That is one. Number two, sir, Nigeria has a very large coastal corridor. The Gulf of Guinea extends from Senegal to Gabon. Some scholars will tell you it's to even to Angola. Now, there's a form of terrorism that a good number of commentators and national policy makers seems to have put on the sideline. That is the kind of IPOP terrorism in the Southeast. And I'm saying with an emphasis because I was a practical security actor there. The kind of terrorism going on there seems not to have national coverage and media attention in the real sense. And that kind of terrorism, funding, and activism seems to be activated because of our lax control of the Gulf of Guinea. A lot of arms comes into that enclave or the IPOP-dominated area through the Gulf of Guinea. Our national attention as policymakers, as broadcast analysts, and of course, as security researchers, needs to be more deeper. Terrorism in Nigeria is not only the Sahelian impact we tend to talk more about. That of the Southeast, particularly, the impact of IPOP is a major drawback to our national development because that region itself is a bastion of economic transformation, innovation, and entrepreneurship.
All right.
Go ahead.
Just finish your thought.
One say I should go ahead, one say I should stop.
No, just finish your thought.
Okay, I should go ahead. Thank you. So the point I'm making is that more effort now has to be made. While we are talking about the northern enclave, the eastern enclave, with respect to containing the IPOP and the inflow of funds there, requires a lot of critical urgency. Most of this fund comes through cryptocurrency platform. Like there's one we call Awala Network. Awala Network is a cryptocurrency platform specifically designed to evade governmental censorship and designed to become a freelance platform for criminals, terrorists, and never-do-wells. We as a nation, through the instrumentality of government, like NFIU, EFCC, And even National Cybercrime Center of the police needs to put more emphasis on this. In addition, many informal engagement like currency transfer, international donor agency activities, masquerading and as NGOs in our country is still a veritable platform for this inflow of money. As I speak today, sir, can I stop?
Well, are you?
I'm not okay.
Because we have to move forward.
Okay,
Am I not moving backward?
No.
If you can just round up
so that we can ask you another question.
So that we can ask another
Yes.
question.
Okay, ask me another question.
Okay. Thank you for giving us a broader perspective, of the magnitude of what, confronts us. Some people have said, look, let us look at the issue of amnesty for the bandits. Some state governments are toying with negotiation with the bandits under the banner of peace accord. Some insist on paying ransom. I'm just wondering, how do all of this, amnesty, negotiations, ransom paying, how do they differ both financially and strategically, with legitimizing non-state actors? And how does it affect our fight, effective counter-terrorism financing fight?
Thank you very much. This question, I answered it on a platform about 2 weeks ago on a public forum. And I still reinstate my disposition or my position to this development. In all sincerity and without equivocation, granting amnesty to terrorists or bandits itself is an admission of governmental failure, is a submission of our sovereignty to criminal elements, is actually dancing on the graves of our patriots who fought insecurity and terrorism to a standstill. Fourthly, is a serious discouragement of Nigerian youths, adults, or Nigerian population who are determined to support government in fighting terrorism. In my view, if anybody take up arms or levy war on the Federation of Nigeria through the instrument of terrorism, that person is not supposed to live. The fact that some people begin to conceive this divisive, derogatory, and unpatriotic mindset that a terrorist has to be assimilated back into the society is something else that is inconceivable. One thing is that we must not mix emotion with reality. I can tell you for free that most of the subnationals, government, who are working this idea, they are working on emotionalism. And what's the emotion? The emotion is this. It is assumed or presumed that most of these terrorists are natives in their localities, whom they know to their families. In order to play emotional balance, then they conceive the idea of giving them amnesty. I want to ask you a rhetorical question. Presuming that these terrorists are foreigners, do you think this school of thought will emanate? The presumption is that on an emotional basis, assuming or presuming that these terrorists are our locals, which one governor even said before, that we know their family, we know their names, we know their locations, we know who they are. Based on that emotion, the idea of giving pardon to them comes in. Assuming that the presumption is that these terrorists are 100% non-Nigerians, are you giving them pardon so that they become settled in the Nigerian system or they go back to their homeland or to their country? No. Therefore, the point I'm making is that in security calculus, we should not bring emotion into consideration.
Okay.
Even if your own brother or half-brother from the same bed is a terrorist, you should not give a consideration that a second chance has to be given. A terrorist is somebody who is determined, designed, and prepared to create mass killing, mass sabotage, and to make daily livelihood impossible. In my view, persons with that kind of mindset are not fit to live in the society or in the country.
So
whether they are your twin brother or your tribesman or your statesman or local government.
So
let me just ask you one last question, a personal question, and with all due respect. And I don't pray for that, we don't pray for that, God forbids it, that someone you know, someone close to you, it may be a family, close family person, is taken or kidnapped, would you pay for ransom, or what would you do?
I, Abutuyaro, AIG retired, I will never.
okay.
I don't subscribe to corruption.
All right. Okay, thank you. We'll just proceed there. Now, let's bring in our guest from Benin, talking about Reverend David Ugolo. He's the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, and member of the Interim Executive Council of the Non-State Actors of African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption. Reverend Ugolo, it's good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria. Hear me? Okay, it's like we're trying to let's just have him settle down. Okay,
Yes,
you want to ask?
Okay, so when Commander AIG spoke about NFIU, Nigeria being, delisted from the, FATF grade list area, and what it means for us, and also, referred to the statements of the head of that unit, eulogizing according to her, the pivotal role played by all the agencies, ministries, and partners in that act. But being on EU's anti-monetary laundering and terrorism financing grid list comes with a huge prize, and that prize means that all EU countries will now begin to view that country, with a second eye. Interrogation, like you said, you go to the embassies, you are thoroughly scrutinized, and there are list of actionable, points that should be carried out against those, personnel or countries and all that. And I'm just wondering, in your view, do you really think that we have actually gotten out of that grade list, or this is just a technical certification for us?
Well, it's important that every achievement, no matter how little it is celebrated. So with that, I think, yes, we should say kudos to all those that are involved, the NFIU, championing that, but also with other government agencies that worked together tirelessly to achieve that. Now, sometimes when like I said earlier, when we talk about these things in abstract, that's why we don't see the implications. Now, I don't know the exact figures, but if cost of finance itself, once you have all these listings and so on and so forth, the cost of finance drastically increases. What do I mean? For example, if you are going to get money from, say, some of these organizations for projects, let's say government or even private individuals, because of the perception that is there, because of being on that list, if other countries, for example, are going to be charged, say, 5%, you might end up paying 10%. You're given double. Your finance comes at twice the price.
Okay.
What is the implication of that? That means in real terms, you are having less money to spend in infrastructure, in industry, in manufacturing, and so on and so forth, and even services. Now, not only that, it means also when you are paying back this, it has a lot. So it stifles growth and development generally. So when you're lifted from that, it means, like you said, EU is a huge trade bloc and also with a lot of financing capacities and so on, both governmental and even at private levels. That's even between government to government or between businesses across this. So when that happens, the implication is that there will be reduced that, maybe even issue of insurance, because all add up to the cost of finance that you use in. So yes, that is something that we should be happy about, both government and also individuals and even corporations. But the question that are we out of the woods? Not yet, because it's the shadow economy itself. Shadow economy, that means when we talk about, or when we look at the formal economy and say, okay, business to business, country to country, those that we see, perhaps that is clear. There are a lot of efforts that have been made. But what happens with the economies that is beneath that formal economy? So those are areas that have to still be focused on, like he said, and we focus on all, because a lot of emphasis, or a lot of, because the violence, because of the violent nature of the terrorism in the northwest and maybe northeast, that's why it's out there in the media and so on. But the Gulf of Guinea, as he says, the maritime domain is also very important. And as you can see, when you talk about ships, for example, look at the quantum of shipments, for example, and what a ship can carry, and what the implications that can have. So these are all areas, and I'm sure a lot is being done, but is it enough? Has it stopped everything? No. So the fact is that we still need to do more. While we celebrate this, it means it gives us more responsibility, because when you are elevated to a particular stage, it's telling you that you have a duty, a responsibility not to relapse and to aim higher. So that you do more.
Let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, please.
You're a security expert. This is what the head of the NFIU, said of security. Said the National Security Advisor was recognized for strengthening national coordination on security-related risks, particularly in addressing terrorism and terrorism financing through enhanced interagency collaboration. Are we actually seeing that?
Well, you see, in terms of, when we say collaboration, there's the one that you see every day, the Army, the Navy, the police, immigrations, and NFIU, EFCC doing joint operations. Physically, you see them moving, maybe writing letters or correspondences and responding and so on. But there's the part that we don't see every day. And that is the type of collaboration that the NSA collaborates. He coordinates all that coordination. Because like I said earlier on, and which she has alluded to, it's not a single agency work. We have highlighted that banks are included. The CBN, which is the supervisory agency for that, is included. Every other, the police, the cybercrime, everyone. So if you achieve that feat, it means that all aspects, all institutions have realized what role they have to play and have played it adequately and in a synchronous way that makes you to achieve that. Because the European Union or any other international bodies, they don't take this lightly. There are parameters that they look out for. There are institutions that they ask if they have been built. There are processes and so on that they actually check. They test them. Not only do they take them, they test to ensure that this. So if it falls somewhere, because for example, if NFIU and every other does everything, then at, say, the airport, I'm just giving this is a hypothetical, then maybe they are tracing someone at the airport, say the immigration service is not able to pick up that. It falls. Everything falls. So it shows a collaboration between all these agencies,
all
which
these
is very
agencies.
important.
Do you think that? But I would like to ask you a question, but we need to go to our Benin now. But probably when we come back, follow up on that.
Okay.
Yes, Reverend Ugolo. I mean, if you can hear us, good morning to you.
Yes.
About financing terrorism, and so far, I mean, our guests have talked about the implication, especially on our national security and economic impact it has. So, but let's look at the fact that want to get your own perspective. How do you think these terror groups, exploit the Nigerian financial, system without raising the red flag? Let's get your perspective on that.
Again, I want to thank the NT for the opportunity to provide some perspective on this very crucial issue. Again, congratulations to Nigeria for Nigeria being taken away from the EU listing, which again demonstrates that Nigerian policy to tackle this huge challenge, terrorism financing, is working in the sense that at least there's some level of coordination among the agency, particularly the NFIU, EFCC, and other agencies. So we must congratulate the Nigerian government because obviously, like some of the panelists rightly noted earlier on, the removal of Nigeria from the EU listing again sends a very positive signal about the country. It also demonstrates that things are working in the right direction to tackle this challenge, because obviously the implication of continuing to remain in such list is such damaging to the economy, not just the economy, even individual, private sectors, and the entire country. And so the fact that Nigeria was removed last year from the FATF green list, and with the EU decision to also follow suit, again send a very strong positive signal about the country. And that for me is something we must all continue to congratulate the Nigerian government. But having said that, the rules, the system, because in the next 2 years, Nigeria will be facing another evaluation from FATF. And if this current reform that have attracted this removal is not sustained and deepened, you will be surprised that we will return back again to the green list. And that will not be good for the country. And that's why we must continue to encourage the Nigerian government to continue to put support to NFIU, EFCC, and then to sustain the interagency cooperation so that this problem of terrorism financing can be reduced to the minimum. And there are other economic incentives for this happening, particularly in the area of rare minerals in the Zamfara axis and the northeast, northwest. These incentives need to be disconnected. Otherwise, we will continue to face this problem. Those who are mining gold, mining rare minerals, they have incentive to continue to do that, and they pass this across the border. And because of lack of transparency and accountability in the financial system, it is easy to move money out and into the country. And this damages the economy. Apart from not damaging the economy, these are resources that are supposed to be available for the country to grow the economy of the country. And that's why recently, in working collaboration with the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative and the Federal Ministry of Mining, we have now commissioned a study that will be releasing by the end of this month or early next month, looking into how illicit financial flow works around these gold mines and this rare mineral. Because the incentive to continue to engage in this illegal activity is only can grow when the law enforcement agencies are not strengthened. And that's the reason why I think the reform need to be deepened, it need to be sustained, the interagency coordination need to be sustained, and then international cooperation need to be sustained, and then technical capacity for the agencies to be able to act effectively need to be sustained. And once this is put together, and with the political support from the presidency, like for example, when Nigeria was removed from the FATF green list last year, you can not underestimate the political support that came from the presidency to NFIU. And the leadership of the current NFIU also led to that success story. And today we are all celebrating this success story. We must give kudos to the leadership of this agency, including EFCC, NFIU, and other interagency corporations framework that has been put in place under the leadership of the federal government. For me, it's something that we must continue to sustain. But look back again, the issue of poverty, and then look into government policies in tackling poverty across the country. If you look the growing populations that are currently affected because of the reform government is carrying out, you will obviously see the disconnect, because take, for example, the removal of oil subsidy. The benefit of that, who is currently taking that benefit? We now know that most governors across the 36 states are not getting more resources. But is this affecting the population? Not at all. So resources is growing into the hands of governors, but poverty is growing. And that, for me, is something that we must begin to see that feeds this terrorism. Because people that are not properly fed, people who are not properly economically empowered, they can become a tool in the hands of this terrorist group, like Boko Haram, kidnapping, and all that. And so if government wants to technically address this issue, you must address the issue of poverty. And one key government policies that tackle poverty in the country is social protection, cash for the poor, empowering the poor. But what has happened in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs? After the old corruption scandal in the Ministry of Affairs, I'm not sure that there is more resources going to this ministry. And once resources are not going to this ministry, more resources not going to social protection across the country, you have increasing poverty. And when poverty is increasing in the northern part of the country, these people become readily a recruit for terrorist people. And there's nothing government can do. And when you have millions of Nigerians moving into poverty, then they become a good target for terrorist group like Boko Haram and others, ISWAPs. So my take is that the federal government, while they are celebrating the removal from the EU list, they should also find a way to look at the budget. And National Assembly has got a role to play. Now that we are considering that budget, the current budget we have, how much of the money that we benefited from the removal of oil subsidy goes to the poor? And there must be transparency about this. And then who are those people benefiting? We have the ministry that are superintending in all these things. We need to empower them, because the long-term implication of not tackling the poverty issue, it will be a big problem for the country. So that's something we must look into. And then we must look into the private sector, the banks. We must look into how they are operating. It's very important if we are to move forward with this.
Thank you. I want to remain with you, but just to let our viewer know that you can also send in your comments or your questions or suggestions. The number to send your SMS is right there on the screen. Reverend Ugodo, let's look at another stakeholder, in this fight against terrorism financing. That's the telecommunication, sector. That sector sits squarely at the intersection of 1, financing, 2, identity, keeps, 3, communication. And I'm just wondering how critical is their role in this fight? And then how can telecom intelligence strengthen early warning such that we're able to disrupt even this flow before the attacks?
This question is very, very important for us to move forward in terms of tackling this problem. For this disruption to happen, the whole issue of ownership, beneficial ownership, who are the owners of this telecom private company, and then the regulator, you have to unpack this. If you don't unpack this, then there'll be problem. So government has responsibility to ensure that ownership is identified, and that the private sectors are partner in tackling this challenge. And I completely agree with you that if we are to move forward in tackling this problem in the country, for example, how do terrorists finance their activity? They do it through kidnapping, and they use the telecom system. And when they use the telecom system, how do they register to get a phone number? All this need to be put in place. But how do we put in place a regulation that will help empower the monitoring agencies to be able to carry out actions that will disrupt the activity of terrorist group? Then effective enforcement is very required. And then for early warning system, like you rightly noted, to happen, then government must pursue collective action. This is not what government alone can achieve. We need a collective action. We need the private sector, the private telecommunication company, and the regulator. They need to come together and agree that it is in our mutual interest, because the more terrorist action happen in the country, the private sectors don't do well in that climate. And so the government need to create that enabling environment for collective action to happen in tackling terrorist activity across the country. So I completely agree that we must put in place an action that will empower the regulator to put an eye on the private telecompanies who are providing telephones and private phones to these individuals, and that so that we can unpack the ownership and identities behind them. And once we begin to do that, then we also move to the range of the fact that there should be sanction system, because it is a crime that is damaging the economy of the country. If a telecommunication company is found guilty, it should be fined, and such resources can now be used to refinance the regulator, because crime itself should not be seen at the end game of taking people to court. We should find a way to see crime tackling as a source of revenue for the government. Because if you see what happens in the United States and other places, when a company, private company, banks are found guilty, you see they are sometimes fined $1 million, $20 million. That becomes a huge source of income. And if a company, for example, any of these telecommunication companies, they are found wanting that their systems is weak, then government fine them like $2 billion, $3 billion. That $3 billion can go into NFIU to sustain and finance NFIU activity and EFCC. And the individuals in those companies, we need to unpack them. Because you see, when we say we are trying to fight terrorism action in Nigeria, it is not a faceless people that are sustaining this culture in the country. It is people, it is individual, it is interest. And for us to unpack them, government must have resources. And to have resources, fighting it can become a source of revenue for the government.
Reverend Ugolo, you have raised a lot of issues there. It demands collective efforts, and government can raise a lot of revenue in fighting terrorism. We'll pause here. We'll take a break. We've received a lot of questions and comments from our viewers. When we come back, we'll read out those questions and comments so that our guests can respond to them. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And our discussion is still on financing terrorism, and our guests are here. And just before we went on that short break, Reverend Ugolo was, reeling out some major issues that Wing Commanders would like to, react to some of the things that he said when it comes to the issue of the telecoms and their activities, in fighting terrorism.
Okay, well, yes, he raised very pertinent issues in terms of the telecoms and so on. And we have to accept that it's a work in progress, tying up this NIN and the various forms of identifications of identity management that we have. It's long. This should have been done a long time ago, but it's good that we're making that effort so that when you know people, when you know patterns, because through information, through this data, you can learn, like I said earlier, connecting the dots, connecting who is doing that. And the telecom, unfortunately, we've had instances whereby these ransoms or kidnappers and so on use all these means of communication. And I don't know if it is on the side of the telecoms operators or on the side of the security agencies, that there is that synergy to be able to triangulate, to be able to pinpoint within the fastest possible time that this is happening within this particular area. Then in terms of the incentive, or why should they do that? We talked about the issue of fines, which he rightly highlighted. The system we have failed to understand that we can get so much and make them incentivize them to ensure that they do that, because every company, typically if we go, they look at their balance sheets. If you have fines, regulatory, you are not able to meet up with the regulatory requirements every day and you're fined every day, the management loses out. The shareholders are going to kick out against that. So until we make it so expensive for the costs, we have to make the cost so high. For example, if we say that for every call that is made and is not able to be triangulated and to be pinpointed, the telecom provider is going to pay so amount, a very hefty fine. Then you find out that we're able to do it. But let us not push everything to the telecom providers, because we don't know if our security agencies also have the capacity to do that, or even little things as ability to respond. Because sometimes it's not enough to have the intelligence, to have everything, but your ability to respond timely to that also matters.
Ability to respond
you
timely.
mentioned NIM, and that brings me to our identity infrastructure, which is, NIMC is the repository of that. And I'm just wondering if you could just enlighten us, how NIMC is, also helping in this fight, and whether linking our NIM to bank accounts, SIM cards, and financial, platforms help to close this identity loophole.
Well, first, I must give that I don't know much about NIMC, their operations as a person. But from what we read and see and so on, and other countries, you find out that if you go to most of these countries, all you need to do is to give your phone number and date of birth. In a lot of countries, every information about you comes up, and so on and so forth. So we should be going towards that, whether it's the bank, whether it's buying of SIM card, whether it's, all those loops, all those loopholes. NIMC as an organization should be able to tie them. And just like we are talking and applauding that NFIU was able to, through the coordination of the NSA, I think that's an area that there is need for proper coordination also. That all institutions, that collect data, how do we unify that? How do we ensure that once something is said about one particular person, we're able to connect those dots and know what is, or when a crime happens, that within the shortest possible time, there is identity that is done and that person is identified, and the security agencies can now swoop in.
All right. Thank you very much. It takes us back to the issue of collaboration of government agencies in this fight. Now, let's take some of these, the comment from viewers. This is from Nandam Wuye from Jos. I understand that terrorists often disguise funds within legitimate business operations, charities, non-profit organizations, making it hard to distinguish between legitimate charitable work and illicit financing. They constantly adapt to circumvent financial monitoring, essentially staying one step ahead of authorities by identifying cracks in the financial system. Now, Chris Simon says, good morning, presenters and gentlemen in the studio. Terrorism or insurgency is the main challenge Nigeria is facing presently. To curb terrorist activities, government should arrest and prosecute those financing terrorism in Nigeria. Good morning, Nigeria. Panel, my name is Abbas Abubakar Sahad from Jalingo. Cutting off terrorism financing, in addition to other things, requires border control, cooperation at both national and international levels, and monitoring charities and NGOs to ensure that donations are used to legitimate humanitarian purpose. This Chief Alfred Madakpa from Adamawa. He says, good morning. I am a die-hard listener of Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you, Chief. On the issue of tackling terrorism financing, I truly appreciate the contributions made on the program by all the guests, especially the gentleman in big agbada. He spoke directly to the point.
Are you there?
AIG, yes. Okay.
Yes, I think I have just two. One had just come in. This is from Engineer Deleke, and he has sent his message from Abuja. Good morning, Demola and Claire, also to the guests in the studio. AIG Arrow just hit the nail on the head by saying state government agitating or negotiating with terrorists should be arrested and prosecuted. From Engineer Umar says, the terrorists use the GSM line of their victims for communication. Their locations should be tracked. Some people say they know where they are. Why are we not having rescue operations? Rescue operations, that question should go to Engineer, Wing Commander Samana. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Nigeria. Terrorism financing is a serious issue in the world. In Nigeria, we have DIE, NIE, CIB, ETC, and reports have indicated that those who are behind it are VIPs in the country. Now, my suggestion here is arrest the culprits and execute them, and declare or forfeit their assets to the federal government. You didn't say your name, but thank you all the same. So please, when you're sending in your messages, let us know who you are so we can also appreciate you even better.
Let's AIG respond to some of these comments.
Thank you very much. Particularly, I want to commend the man who described the man in Bigabada. Well, we have to be very Nigerian in all perspectives, including our ways, what we consume, how we talk, and how we run our country. Thank you for that. There's one important point I want to highlight so that it doesn't enter the realms of forgetfulness. We are running a country, and we are a people. 90% of the telecommunications platforms in our country are foreign owned or foreign based. What prevented us, or what still prevents us from defining the atmosphere of their operation? For example, prescribing and ensuring that telecommunication outfit in our country, apart from financial requirement of licensing, must have an operating space that provides for ensuring that every call has a geolocational algorithm. That is to say, as you make every call, the location must be identified on the system. These are characteristics of the provision of emerging technology. If you want to invest in my country as a telecom operator, ensure that instruments and templates exist to ensure that every call that emanates or originates from your system has a geolocational identity. If you arrive in China, any call you make in the China Republic, your geolocation, including your face here, must always be recorded by national security algorithm. Since these people are telecommunication investors coming to our country, they are coming to make money because we have the market, 230 million population. What prevented NCC or any other relevant regulation authority from imputing this clause into the contract? That is question, and it requires further review by policy makers, our governmental authority. Number two, sir, why is it that we have not made it mandatory in our country to ensure that all fintechs, that is financial technology platforms that do money transfer, do not have capacity of identifying location and source of money? With respect to terrorism financing, I can tell you for free that as of today, 80% of terrorism funding comes through this platform of fintech. Money transfer in smaller tranches through platforms that are localized, that are seemingly small. But yet, as a country, we did not create a mandatory requirement for these operators to provide enabling algorithm that defines origin and point of deposit of this money. That lacuna itself is a national security threat to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And if it is possible, and I believe it is possible, remedial and corrective effort has to be made, either through legislation or through administrative fiat. Thirdly, I wish to present to our country and to our people through this forum, here and now, that terrorism financing in the scale we are witnessing needs further re-examination of the BDCs, the Bureau de Charge, or whatever they call them. A good number of them are operating as if they are banking platform or value-changing platforms that has put the Federal Republic in a very disadvantageous disposition. They need to be monitored.
Okay. Thank you, AIG. Thank you very much. I think we should go to Benin now. Reverend Ugolo, I just want you to, one of the viewers sent in a message talking about prosecution. And the head of the NFIU, in appreciating, those who collaborated in getting us out of the fact list, mentioned the judiciary specifically for, according to her, he said, proper adjudication and proportionate sanction. And I'm just wondering, because there are quite a number of people who have been named, allegedly so, but somehow, I don't know, what do you think about the role of the judiciary, even within this context of fighting terrorism financing?
I want to thank our last speaker who actually dealt extensively to how we could move this conversation forward. I think the first thing we have to do is to agree that this is a problem that is affecting everybody and that we need to end it. And in ending it, we all have responsibility. And just to answer the question again, is to put it in perspective, what kind of government policy that can help end this problem. And in doing that is the capacity of the institutions that are made to implement the policy. Government alone cannot solve this problem. Even in the United States, where they are the most super nation in the world, you can see how the government is collaborating with the private sector, like Meta, like other internet, big Microsoft. They are all, the government agencies are working closely with them to tackle different specific problems relating to smuggling, migration, even defense. But in Nigeria, yeah, those that are in government they don't, that culture of taking advantage of the skill and capacity of the private sector, the not-profit sector, look like a taboo. And so most things within government circle are seen as confidential to the extent of proper collaboration with outside have become very difficult. Take, for instance, the skills and knowledge of artificial intelligence do not necessarily reside within government as we speak today. But if any government wants to really tackle terrorist financing and putting in place a new approach that will be two poles ahead of the crime is artificial intelligence. But you will agree with me that most government agencies across the country today don't have that capacity to do this. So if you use the large language model as a framework, it will be difficult, it will be easier to connect the data from the telecom, the fintech, and even the individuals that track the calls. And when you put those data together, you can easily do a model that can anticipate. So rather than restricting ourselves to traditional reactive model that is a bit expensive, secretive to even control. So government must encourage a new approach and look beyond government to look for skills and ideas that can help drive new reforms that can help sustain tackling this problem. But you see, if you just watch just in the last few days now, the Minister for Interior went to the passport office, just listening to that conversation. Where we are today, some people are benefiting from it. That this crime we call terrorism financing is an income for some people. And so in disrupting these people's income, you are facing a challenge. That's where we are. So who has the responsibility to drive this reform is the president of the country. Through how he has done it, an example of success story is the way the presidency works closely with NFIU that led to the removal of Nigeria from the green list, the FATF green list, and then the recent EU removal from the removal of Nigeria from the listing. So we can also take the fight to the extent to ensure that government look beyond traditional bureaucrats, civil servants, because what we are saying today in this regulatory framework, what we are seeing as a problem today is an income. It's an income for some set of people. So, for example, just take the minerals in the northern part of the country, northeast and northwest, gold, all this mining that is happening. It doesn't go to government purse. It's going to private purse. So if you end illicit financial flow in that sector, you are ending black market that is sustaining the current, some of the elite in the country. And so we must understand and begin to assign, how do we tackle this problem? Who has the political will? And so the political incentive to do this is that if the government of the day does not tackle this problem, when it comes to the cycle of election, the people will victimize such government. That's one. Then two, internationally.
Fortunately, we just have to cut you there, Reverend Ogolo, because of time. Thank you so much for that, your contribution there, that government needs to employ, technology as part of the strategies to tackle this challenge that we are facing. In just 30 seconds, because of time, just tell us, what priorities do you think should be strategized? I mean, what strategies do you think government should prioritize in tackling this challenge? In 30 seconds.
So for me, it's being meticulous about identifying the sources of this financing, identifying the financiers, and making it difficult for them through prosecution, through all means, to ensure that they are not able to get these funds across to those that will use them for terrorist acts.
Okay,
right,
thank you very much.
Wing Commander Musa Salman, retired, so of course, is a doctor, security and development expert. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
Let me also appreciate AIG Abutiaro, FWC retired. Thank you very much, sir, for always being blunt and frank.
Thank you.
And Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, member of the Interim Executive Council of the Non-State Actors of African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption. You joined us from our Benin studio. Thank you very much. This is a topic that we cannot exhaust in one program. We hope to probably, take another look at it sometime. But that's it on Good Morning Nigeria for today. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us and all of you who sent in